Level 1. The CopyCat. Someone drops a link in a forum. The tool is free, and the site looks like it was built in the 90s, and you scan the downloaded file 3 times before you dare open it. You don't understand half of what you're doing, but you follow the steps, hit enter, and your neighbor's password appears on your screen. Jennifer 1985. You did nothing. The tool did everything. It probed the network, exploited a vulnerability that's been public knowledge for years, and delivered the result like a vending machine. You just pressed the button. But something shifted anyway. A door that was supposed to stay locked just opened, not because you forced it, because the key was lying on the floor the whole time, and nobody thought to look down. Your friends think you're a genius. You let them believe it. The truth is less cinematic. You're a tourist, armed with the tools of other hackers you've never met. The real hackers are the ones who discover vulnerabilities and exploit them. So, you start learning security tools and programming languages, network protocols, SQL injection, buffer overflows. Each concept unlocks 10 others, a cascade of understanding that reveals just how much you didn't know. You start coding. Python first, because everyone starts with Python, then C, because understanding memory requires manipulating it, then assembly, because that's where software meets hardware and where the most dangerous exploits live. The forums become your university, pseudonyms teaching pseudonyms, knowledge shared freely because knowledge hoarded is knowledge that dies. The community is brutal toward laziness and generous toward curiosity. Ask a good question once, and you'll get an answer better than any textbook. Ask the same question twice, and you stop existing. Your first original exploit is embarrassingly simple, a contact form that doesn't sanitize inputs. The vulnerability has existed on this site for years. You're probably not the first to find it, but you found it yourself through your own analysis, and that matters. The database scrolls across your screen. Usernames, email addresses, passwords hashed in MD5, which is essentially unhashed to anyone with a rainbow table, customer data, payment information, administrative credentials. You don't do anything with it. The access itself is the achievement. You cross from consumer to producer, from user to creator. The tools you ran before were written by people exactly like you, who started exactly where you started. Now you're one of them. The late nights compound. You lose jobs because you can't focus on work that doesn't matter. You lose relationships because you can't explain what you're doing to people who wouldn't understand. The isolation feels like freedom. The obsession feels like purpose. Level 2. The Freelancer. Money enters the picture not through your own initiative, but through a message from someone who noticed your forum posts. A job offer. Vaguely worded. Testing security for a company that may or may not have authorized the testing. Payment in cryptocurrency. Work done under a pseudonym. You're not naive enough to say yes immediately, but you're not honest enough to say no. You research the client using every tool you've learned, piecing together an identity from digital breadcrumbs. The company is real. The security concern might be legitimate. The gray area is genuinely gray rather than obviously criminal. You take the job. The target is a competitor's web infrastructure. You're supposed to find vulnerabilities and document them. Whether that documentation goes to the competitor for remediation or to the client for exploitation is not your concern. You're just a security researcher, technically. The work takes 3 weeks. 4 critical vulnerabilities: account takeover, data exfiltration, and service disruption. You document everything professionally, as if delivering a corporate penetration test report. You receive payment. Nobody gets arrested. The money opens doors that passion alone couldn't open. Better equipment, time to focus. You take more freelance work, always careful, always pseudonymous, always maintaining plausible deniability. The rationalizations get smoother with practice. You're not hurting anyone. You're finding problems that would be found eventually anyway. The companies you target have lawyers and insurance. The people whose data you access are abstractions, usernames and database rows, not humans with lives attached to them. Your handle builds a reputation, reliable work, clean documentation, professional communication. The jobs get more interesting and more lucrative. Cryptocurrency wallets accumulate balances that would be difficult to explain to a tax authority. Operational security becomes second nature. VPNs chained through multiple jurisdictions, virtual machines that leave no trace on the host system, communication channels that encrypt everything and delete it automatically. You learn to think about surveillance before you do anything, planning escape routes before you need them. You become a ghost online, increasingly a ghost offline too, existing in the spaces between surveillance systems. Level 3. The Specialist. Every hacker eventually specializes because the field is too vast for generalization. Some choose web applications, some choose network infrastructure, some choose hardware, pulling firmware from chips with a soldering iron. You choose financial systems, banks, payment processors, cryptocurrency exchanges, the targets with the most money and therefore the most security. Breaking into them requires understanding not just technology, but regulation, not just code, but compliance. Your first major financial intrusion takes 8 months of preparation. A mid-sized bank, big enough to have real money, not big enough to have world-class defenses. You don't attack directly. You compromise a third-party vendor that supplies customer service software, then use that foothold to pivot into the bank's internal network. The lateral movement feels like a puzzle unfolding in real time. Each captured system opens new possibilities. Each escalated privilege reveals new targets. You map the infrastructure slowly, carefully, invisibly. The customer database, the transaction processing systems, the cold wallet holding cryptocurrency reserves. You extract nothing. Not yet. The reconnaissance is its own product. Network maps, privilege chains, unpatched 0 days, intelligence that has value to people who will pay well for it. You sell the access to an intermediary who never tells you what comes next. The distance is deliberate. Whatever follows is someone else's business. The money from that sale is substantial, life-changing if you were willing to change your life visibly. You're not. Visible spending attracts attention, and attention is what you avoid. The cryptocurrency sits in nested wallets behind multiple layers of obfuscation, accumulating value while you continue living modestly. Your skills compound. Each intrusion teaches techniques applicable to the next. The patterns repeat across institutions. Similar technologies, similar misconfigurations, similar human failures. Social engineering works on bank employees the same as anyone else. Phishing works on security professionals who should know better. Human vulnerabilities never get patched. The financial sector's security, despite its reputation, proves surprisingly inconsistent. The big banks are hard, but they all depend on vendors who aren't. The payment processors are protected, but the merchants using them are not. Every chain has weak links. Finding weak links is what you do. Level 4. The Organization. Working alone hits a ceiling. The largest targets require coordination, operations too complex for any single person to execute. You're recruited not into a gang, but into a network, loosely affiliated specialists who collaborate on specific jobs without ever occupying the same room. Your role is initial access. Others handle reconnaissance, persistence, privilege escalation, exfiltration, monetization. The division of labor lets expertise concentrate. You become excellent at one thing rather than adequate at everything. The targets escalate. Fortune 500 companies with security operations centers staffed around the clock. Government contractors with classified data sitting on unclassified networks. Critical infrastructure controlling things you don't want to think about too carefully. Power grids, water treatment, air traffic systems. You maintain the fiction that you're not responsible for what your access enables. You open doors.
What walks through them is someone else's decision. But the consequences exist regardless of the fiction. Ransomware deployed through access you provided encrypts hospital systems during a pandemic. Data pulled through your breach appears on forums where it gets used for fraud and harassment. A bank you compromised goes undetected until customer accounts are drained. And then it's the customers who absorb the loss. The rationalizations strain under the weight. You could stop. You have enough money to stop. But the work is addictive in ways that have nothing to do with money anymore. The problem solving, the proof of capability, the confirmation delivered by each successful intrusion that you are genuinely good at something genuinely difficult, something most people cannot comprehend, something that matters, even if it matters in ways you'd rather not examine too closely. Law enforcement awareness grows. Indictments appear against people you've worked with, the ones who weren't careful enough or weren't lucky enough, or both. The risk calculus shifts. Operations become fewer and larger. You work with fewer people and trust them less. The paranoia becomes a tool rather than a symptom. You assume every new contact is a federal agent until proven otherwise. You assume every operation is being observed until the money clears. You build exit strategies for your exit strategies. The mental weight of maintaining perfect security grows heavier each year. But the alternative is prison. Level 5. The Ghost. The operation that ends everything starts like dozens before it. A financial services company, familiar infrastructure, predictable vulnerabilities. Your team plans the intrusion carefully. Attack paths mapped, tools staged, timing coordinated across time zones. The access goes smoothly. Inside the network, you find the usual sprawl of poorly segmented systems and poorly managed credentials. The path to the database is clear. Exfiltration begins without incident. Then, something changes. Honeypot data. It looks valuable. It exists only to be taken and to track whoever takes it. Law enforcement has been watching this company, using it as bait, waiting for exactly this kind of intrusion. You're inside a system that's inside a larger trap. The team scatters. Communication channels go dark. Everyone executes their own exit strategies simultaneously. You execute procedures you've rehearsed for years but never used. Destroy the hardware. Burn the cryptographic keys, move the cryptocurrency through tumblers so layered that tracing it would take years, if it can be traced at all. Erase every identity that could connect to your activities. Your legal name appears nowhere in the indictments. The firewalls between your identities held. You watch from a distance as others are arrested, operations exposed, years of work unraveled in press releases. Your name is not among them. You were careful enough, or lucky enough, or some combination of both that you'll never be able to fully calculate. The close call doesn't produce a moral revelation. It produces a practical recalibration. The risk no longer justifies the reward. The skills that made you valuable to criminal networks are the same skills that legitimate security companies will pay for. The transition is possible if you're willing to accept less money for less paranoia. You build a consulting practice under a new identity, in a new country. The paperwork takes months. The backstory takes longer. Certifications obtained through legitimate study, employment references that exist because you built the companies that provide them, a history that explains your skills without revealing their source. The clients are companies who want to know how they'd be attacked. They hire you to attack them first, under contract, with lawyers and documentation and signed scope agreements. The work is identical, just with permission. The thrill is different, muted, bounded by rules, but the intellectual challenge remains intact. You find yourself giving advice you ignored when you needed it most. Patch your systems, train your employees, assume breach, and plan for detection rather than prevention. The irony of teaching security to people who would arrest you if they knew your history isn't subtle. The past lives in encrypted archives you'll probably never open again. The cryptocurrency sits in cold storage, too dangerous to move, too large to ignore. A retirement fund you may never be able to spend. Either outcome is something you've made peace with. The skills stay sharp through legal application. You break into systems that have authorized you to break into them. You find vulnerabilities that get patched rather than exploited. You document attack paths that get closed instead of sold. Sometimes you recognize your own fingerprints in the techniques the next generation is using. Exploits you wrote, attack patterns you refined, knowledge you spread through forums, the same way it was spread to you, freely, anonymously, without considering where it would end up. You built tools that outlasted your conscience. Now you're on the other side, trying to blunt the edges of your own legacy. Some nights you think about the hospitals, the patients, the accounts drained from people who couldn't absorb the loss, the human cost of work you treated as abstract. Thinking about it changes nothing that already happened. The guilt can't reverse the damage. All you can do is stop producing new damage, which isn't redemption, but it's something to hold on to when nothing else is available. The work continues. And somewhere right now, in a forum that looks like it was designed in 1997, a kid just pressed a button and watched a password appear on their screen for the first time. They don't understand what they did, but something just shifted in how they see the world, and you know exactly where that leads, because you drew the map.